Okay guys, so episode 7 just came out and there's this moment with Jax that's been stuck in my head since I watched it. Cause right before he pushes that red button, we get these quick flashes of what looks like real world memories. And when you actually sit down and look at what these images are showing, plus some other details from the episode like his room, it starts forming this theory that's honestly pretty devastating. So let's talk about what we're actually seeing in these flashback images. We get shots of this residential neighborhood at dusk or early evening, and you can see houses with lights on, trees lining the street, and there's a speed limit sign that clearly says 20, which means this is the kind of quiet neighborhood where families live, where kids are probably outside playing or riding bikes after school. And then we also get these images of a dark road at night, shot from what looks like a dashboard camera perspective, like we're seeing it from inside a car. One shows this empty highway surrounded by trees, completely isolated, no street lights, just the headlights cutting through the darkness. And another shows a similar road, but it's curving, and you can see how the headlights are illuminating this bend ahead. And there's this feeling of motion to it, like speed, like something's about to happen. And when you look at these images together, they start telling this really specific story, because we're seeing a residential neighborhood and these dark isolated roads at night, and that combination feels intentional, like we're watching fragments of events that led to something terrible. Now here's where this gets really dark, and it connects to something we saw way back in episode 4 that nobody really thought much about at the time. Remember when Jax finished his shift at Spudsy's and got into his car at the end of the adventure? The license plate of that car was Jax001, and at the time people theorized maybe it meant Jax was an NPC or the first person trapped in the circus or whatever. But what if it's actually way simpler and way more horrific than that? What if that license plate is Kane's way of marking Jax's car in the adventure as a reference to what happened in real life? Because if Jax was driving that night, if he was the one behind the wheel when something went wrong, then every time Kane creates an adventure where Jax gets into a car, he's making him relive that trauma. He's forcing him to remember what it felt like to be in control of a vehicle that ended up hurting someone. And this brings us to Jax's room, which we finally got to see in episode 7, and it's decorated like a little girl's bedroom. We're talking pink and purple walls, a small table with chairs, decorations that look like they belong to a child. And when you first see it, it seems completely random, because why would Jax's room look like that? But when you connect it to these flashback images and the theory about the car accident, it suddenly makes horrifying sense. Because what if Jax hit a little girl that night? What if he was driving through that residential neighborhood, maybe going too fast, maybe not paying attention, and a child ran out into the street or was riding her bike or just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and he couldn't stop in time? And those images of the dark roads, that could be him driving away in shock or trying to get help or just fleeing the scene because he panicked and didn't know what else to do. But here's where this gets even worse, because what if he didn't just panic and drive away for a few minutes before calling for help? What if he actually fled the scene completely? Like what if he hit this little girl and then just kept driving, left her there, didn't call 911, didn't stop, just ran because he was terrified of what would happen if he stayed? And that would change everything about the legal situation he'd be facing in the real world, because it's not just vehicular manslaughter at that point, it's a hit and run, which is a completely different level of criminal charge that comes with way harsher penalties and basically zero sympathy from anyone. Because people can sometimes understand an accident, they can have compassion for someone who made a terrible mistake but stayed and tried to help, but someone who hits a child and then drives away and leaves them there, that's the kind of thing that destroys your entire life, that makes you unemployable, that gives you death threats, that turns you into a person everyone in your community hates. And if Jax really did that, then yeah, going back to the real world means going to prison for years, maybe decades, and even after you get out, your life is essentially over because no one's ever gonna forgive you for that. And maybe that's part of why he was driving in the first place, because there's this other detail that's worth thinking about from episode 5. Remember when Ragata was talking about her mom and how verbally abusive she was, and Jax got really quiet and weird during that conversation. Like he usually makes jokes about everything and tears people down when they're being vulnerable, but in that moment he just went silent. And what if that's because he has his own history with a bad home situation? What if he was running away from home that night when the accident happened? Because that would make the whole thing even more tragic. If Jax was a teenager trying to escape an abusive household, maybe he just grabbed the car keys and left in the middle of the night and he was driving too fast because he was emotional and not thinking clearly, and that's when he hit someone, and then he panicked even harder because now he's not just running away from home, he's running away from killing someone. And maybe those dark dark, isolated roads in the flashbacks are just him driving and driving with no destination, just trying to get as far as possible from what he did. And if that's true, then Kane designing Jax's room to look exactly like what that little girl's bedroom might have looked like, that's insanely cruel and basically psychological torture that's specifically calculated to make sure Jax never forgets what he did. That every single night when he goes to sleep, he's surrounded by reminders of the life he destroyed. And maybe this is a reach and it's obviously just a theory, but this would explain so much about Jax's character that we've been trying to figure out since the beginning, because he's not just mean for no reason. He's carrying this massive guilt about something he can't fix, something he can't take back, and all of his behavior, the cruelty, the insistence that nothing matters, the way he pushes everyone away, that's all coming from someone who genuinely believes he deserves to suffer, that he doesn't deserve friendship or happiness or redemption. And honestly, this connects to something Goosework said on Tumblr that nobody really talked about much at the time, because she mentioned that out of all the circus members, Jax deserves to be there the most. And when she said that, people were confused because we didn't really know what it meant, but if this theory is right, if Jax really did commit a hit and run that killed a child, then yeah, that statement makes perfect sense, because compared to the other circus members who mostly seem like normal people who made smaller mistakes or just had bad luck, Jax actually did something that you could argue deserves serious punishment. And the thing about fatal car accidents is they don't just affect you in the moment, they completely reshape how you see yourself and how you move through the world. Because even if it was an accident, even if there was truly nothing you could have done differently, you're still the person who was behind that wheel when someone died, and that kind of guilt becomes part of your identity in ways that are almost impossible to explain to people who haven't experienced it. But when you add fleeing the scene on top of that, when you add the fact that you chose to save yourself instead of trying to help or calling for an ambulance, that guilt becomes something even heavier, because now it's not just about the accident, it's about the choice you made afterwards, the moral failure that you can never undo. But what makes this even worse is that Kane clearly knows exactly what happened, and instead of helping Jax process this trauma or giving him any kind of path toward healing, he's actively weaponizing it against him. And this actually tracks with what we've been learning about Kane throughout the series, how he's not this innocent AI just trying to entertain everyone. He's been getting progressively more manipulative and cruel, and maybe this is proof that he's always been this way. That from the very beginning, he's been using people's worst memories and biggest regrets as tools to psychologically torment them. And when you start thinking about it that way, it makes you wonder about the other circus members' rooms too, because if Jax's room is designed around this trauma, maybe everyone's rooms are. Like we saw Zubul's room full of mirrors in episode 6, and at the time it seemed like maybe Kane was trying to help them find body parts they'd be comfortable with. But what if all those mirrors are actually there to force Zubul to constantly confront a reflection they'll never be satisfied with, to make sure they can never escape their body dysmorphia even for a second. But going back to Jax and that license plate from episode 4, there's something else that's worth thinking about, because Jax 001 feels deliberately chosen by Kane for that adventure, and it makes you wonder what other details in the adventures are actually pulled from the circus members' real lives. Like maybe Kane has access to all their memories, and he's constantly waving in these little references to their trauma, these reminders that look innocent on the surface but hit way different when you know what they actually mean. And that would explain why Jax sometimes seemed to understand the circus better than the other members, why he's so quick to recognize when Kane is messing with them, because he's been paying attention to these patterns. He's noticed how the adventures always seem to have these personal touches that are designed to get under people's skin, and maybe he's been trying to warn the others about it in his own messed up way by being cynical about everything Kane does. But here's where episode 7's ending completely reframes everything we thought we understood about Jax, because he ends up being the one who saves everyone by pushing that red button, and then immediately after he becomes hysterical, claiming that Kane has been messing with his head. And yeah, maybe Kane has been manipulating him, but what if those flashbacks we saw weren't planted by Kane at all? What if they were real memories that surfaced in that moment of extreme pressure? And what if Jax pushed that button not because Kane forced him to, but because he was genuinely terrified of what would happen if he went back to his human life? Just think about that conversation he had with Zubul earlier in the episode.
What's the rush? You got someone waiting for you outside?
Don't you?
Yeah.
And we could see on Jax's face that he doesn't have anyone waiting for him out there. And if that's true, if Jax really has no one and nothing to go back to in the real world, then maybe his human life was actually worse than being trapped in the digital circus, which is honestly insane to think about. Like, what kind of life do you have to be living for a digital prison where you're psychologically tortured every day to be the better option? And when you combine that with the theory about the car accident and the hit and run charges, it starts painting this picture of someone whose entire existence in the real world had already collapsed before they ever got to the circus. Because if Jax killed a little girl while driving and then fled the scene, his real life probably involved active warrants for his arrest, criminal charges that could put him away for decades, the girl's family looking for him, and just this overwhelming weight of guilt and shame that made every single day unbearable, plus the constant fear of being caught. And maybe that's why he doesn't want to go back, because going back means facing actual consequences for what he did, and compared to that, staying in the circus where at least he can pretend none of it matters and be cruel without facing real-world consequences, that's actually the easier choice. And this completely changes how we should interpret his behavior throughout this series, because he's not just someone who's given up on escape because he thinks it's impossible. He's someone who doesn't actually want to escape, who's actively chosen to stay in the circus because whatever is waiting for him outside is worse than anything Kane can do to him. But the really messed up part is that this means Jax has been trapped twice over. And maybe that's what those flashbacks were really showing us. Not just what Jax did, but why he can never go back. Why even when presented with the possibility of escape, he chose to push the button that keeps everyone trapped. Because for him there's no outside, there's just the circus and the memories of what he did, and he'd rather stay here where he can at least control the narrative about who he is, than go back to a world where everyone already knows the worst thing about him. So those flashback images aren't just showing us Jax's trauma, they are showing us why he's the way he is, why he pushes everyone away, why he insists nothing matters, because he's living in a reality where his human life was so completely destroyed by one terrible mistake, and then the even worse choice to run away from it, that even eternal imprisonment in a digital circus feels like the better option. And that's honestly one of the most devastating character revelations we've gotten in this entire show. But let me know what you think about this theory down in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.